100%. You just spend 5 minutes on Instagram or watching reality TV, and you're getting this message that you should be able to have a casual relationship. And if you can't, then what's wrong with you? And like, there are people who, like me, who was just not emotionally available, who was like, I was capable of doing that at a certain stage of my journey. And I don't want to shame that at all, because it was an important part of my journey. And so, but I had to kind of get to this point where I was getting more honest with myself. And I think that's the piece that gets stepped over, because in order to belong to like this bigger collective society, we often have to override what's really true and honest in our body. And we've been doing that since we were little. We have to override the body in order to appease the parents or the caregivers, so that we fit and that we are taken care of and that we survive. And then we continue that pattern into adolescence, into young adulthood, where we're just used to overriding the body. And for a lot of people, they're just not in their body. And so then we kind of play out these situationships, especially as women. And we're like, oh yeah, I'm totally cool. I'm a feminist. Like, I can do anything that a man can do. And I can have casual relationships and it's totally fine. And then 10 years later, your womb is like, bitch, you are not okay with that. Like, you have some healing to do. And when we start to thaw out those places that are frozen over, we start to have more access to our emotional world, our heart. And once we're in relationship with those parts, and it doesn't have to be a perfect relationship, it doesn't have to be a masterful relationship, it's just in connection with those parts, we can start to touch the thread of, is it really true for me to have a casual relationship? And that's really the only question you have to ask. Like, is it really true? And then sit with the answer. And that's the hard part for people, because sitting with the answer means you have to be in your body. You have to feel your feelings. And we don't exactly live in a society that is like emotion friendly. Be like, oh yeah, feel your feelings. That's amazing. There's still a lot of like weird energetics around being an emotional human, whether you're a man or woman or a person. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're not getting like the healthy tutelage of emotions are just a part of your human. You can't outrun them, but you can learn to dance with them. They have a lot of important information. And so when we ask, is it really true for me to be in this situationship? Or is there a younger part that's starving, that's trying to get something through the situationship, or a younger part that's really afraid, that's trying to avoid being seen by being in a situationship? Because a situationship is not going to tend to your deep internal world. It's just not, by virtue of the title. That's not the structure of the relationship. Yeah.
I was just having a conversation last night actually with my partner. We were talking about just like past relationships and stuff. And anyway, we ended up going into like some of the historical relationships for me. And I was talking about this idea of like choosing yourself, which is something I talk about in our book actually. And how I've really been able to, with hindsight, look back at the relationships where I just like was so desperate for them to choose me and put myself in situationships and pretended I was cool with it, right? And was so desperate for it. And of course, those are the ones that didn't. And then I found myself in my my last relationship with my ex-fiance, last relationship before John, where he was, he struggled with alcoholism, and this idea of choosing me really to me was like, I knew, and Danae and I talked about this, like, without a shadow of a doubt, he would never leave. Never. It doesn't matter how bad it got. Like, I knew he wouldn't leave. And at that point in my journey, that like almost felt like enough for me. But also at that point in my journey, I started yoga, I started therapy, I started all of this stuff, right? And so at some point you go through this journey, like you said, and you're like, but wait, is this true for me? right? And all of those questions start to arise. And I feel like for a lot of women, at least in my experience with clients and stuff, it's around that like mid 20s to maybe like early 30s when that starts to crack open, right? When some of those questions start to kind of get faced. And I don't think it's coincidental that that's usually the I guess maybe mid 30s is usually like the typical client age, or people that I'm seeing on Instagram, women questioning this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, to get a little spiritual, like our Saturn return is like 27 to 29. And that's like a pretty big reckoning phase. You know, anything that is unresolved is coming up for review during that 2-year window. And so it's not a surprise that like we go through that portal and then we're starting to question like what we're doing and how we're doing it. And like, is this really true for me? And by that point, we're kind of out of that, you know, party phase. At least I was. Like when I got to my late 20s, I was like, this isn't so fun anymore. Like I'm starting to feel hungover.
Yeah.
I didn't get hangovers before, but like now I'm starting to get them. And I'm like, maybe there's something I can do that's more nourishing for my body. So, you know, it's not a surprise that people come back to dance or yoga or just to the body. And once you're coming back to the body, the next natural step is to look at, well, the way that I'm constructing my life, is that in service to the way that I want to feel? And if I'm doing all these things like drinking my water and like eating my greens and my protein and working out, and I really care for my well-being in that area, like, and we start to pivot into the world of relationships, like, am I bringing that same level of care and devotion to the way that I'm relating to the people that I'm choosing? And then it can become like this kind of almost like second awakening where we're like, oh, that's the area that's kind of out of sync. And this is what I can do to tune that up a little bit. And, you know, maybe I should stop saying yes when I really mean no. Or, you know, stop choosing people who just want casual when I really want something more devotional. And it's totally okay to want the devotional thing, to want the deeper, richer commitment. It's also totally okay to want the surface and the situationship and the casual. It's just, you got to be in right relationship with what is really true for you. Otherwise, it's going to get wonky either way. And I've seen that where people get into serious relationships where they're not actually ready for that. And that causes a lot of damage too. You know, the same as like if you're in a situationship and you want something serious, like there's damage both ways. And there are people out there who want what you want, but they can't find you and match with you if you're lying about what you want. Truth is, you know, a really important part of having healthy relationships.